In the late afternoon of August 7th, 2024, two children returned home from school in the Villa São Cristóvão neighborhood in Tatuí, in the interior of São Paulo. The house was open, everything seemed to be in place, but their mother wasn't there. Her purse was still on the furniture, her documents, cell phone, keys, work materials, everything was absolutely untouched. Andreza Schettini de Lima, 35 years old, had simply disappeared. There were no signs of forced entry, no witnesses, no cameras that could have recorded anything. Only one strange detail started to bother the family. The house's blanket was missing. In the following hours, the anguish grew, and within a few days, that silent absence would reveal something much worse than a disappearance. Why hadn't Andreza left? She never left that house. I'm Marcos Campos, presenting the case of Andreza Schettini de Lima, a 35-year-old woman from Tatuí, São Paulo. Until then, she juggled several roles during the day, working as a manicurist, raising two children on her own, and creating content for TikTok and other social networks. At home, in the company of her family, children, mother, and siblings, she was especially bright and loved. What was unusual in her life? There was one detail, just a recent event, which was an unknown woman who confronted her. So, those who were closest to her thought that maybe solving this mystery and Andreza's return home was connected to that. But the following days brought answers, and we're going to find out about them in today's episode. If you enjoy detailed real cases, subscribe and follow the channel. There are at least 3 episodes like this every week. If possible, become a member. It really helps me with writing and editing. If not, that's okay. Liking or commenting, even with an emoji, directly helps me. Deal? Now that I've given the messages, let's get to the facts. August 7th, 2024 started like any other day at Andreza's house. The kids got ready and headed off to school. Her mother and siblings also left, each one going about their daily routines. But that particular morning, Andreza could afford to stay in bed a little longer. Relaxed, she could calmly have her coffee and then leave without rushing. Why? Let me explain. Because she had clients scheduled at her salon, her own salon, only starting at 10 in the morning, so she wouldn't have to leave early with the kids. Everything was calm that day. After that, everything becomes a mystery. Because that morning, Andreza didn't arrive at her workplace, nor could she be reached by phone. No one knew about her. But I need to explain these events to you better, okay? Because it was when her children returned home, there in the Villa São Cristóvão neighborhood, in Tatuí, followed shortly after by Mrs. Erminda, who is Andreza's mother. That's when they realized that something really wasn't right. There was something there, something fishy going on. This was already in the late afternoon of that day, okay? None of Andreza's family members knew her whereabouts, and her work materials were still at the house. Andreza's purse was also there. In other words, guys, everything I mentioned in the introduction, documents, cell phone, house keys, makeup, everything that women usually keep in their purses was there. There were no signs of forced entry in the house, which could have been a comforting detail, right? But it didn't help at all. Not exactly comforting. Because if the house hadn't been broken into or invaded, the manicurist herself could have opened the door and made it easier for someone to come in, kidnap her, and do her harm. Don't you agree? How many times have we seen this happen around here? And that person could have been either a stranger or someone she knew. For the investigators, there was still another possibility, because since Andreza was an adult, she could have simply left. That's right, guys, it could have been a voluntary disappearance, you know? Unlikely but possible. Why not? However, Andreza's son noticed that, besides his mother, a blanket had disappeared from the house. And for those who are used to true crime stories, that raises a red flag, right? A different kind of concern also came up for them at that moment. Andreza's sister and brother, both adults, also didn't have any answers to the questions of this mystery. So, the whole family mobilized to search for her. Throughout the whole night, she was searched for among her contacts, her friends, In short, both physically and virtually, the effort was very extensive. Of course, the police were called right after. Unfortunately, however, the investigation revealed a tragedy that went far beyond a kidnapping or a disappearance without any apparent reason. 2 days later, on August 9th, Andreza's body was found by military police officers in the backyard of her own house. That's right, the body was very close to the house, as can be seen in the footage shown in many news reports. It was at the very back of the property, down a slope that leads close to a stream or a small river. There was the woman's body, wrapped in that blanket that went missing from the house and partially hidden by leaves and branches. Some reports also mention that there were some garbage bags over the body as well. With this terrible scene, people were already thinking of femicide. That's why, initially, the police believed that the crime had been committed by a boyfriend or an ex-boyfriend. For the police chief, the most effective approach was to question the men who had been involved with her, her ex-husband, the father of her children, ex-boyfriends, and her current boyfriend, if there was one. And also one man in particular, someone who was identified only as a police officer. A guy she had recently gone out with, but his ex-girlfriend, who was upset about Andreza being in the police officer's life, had caused some kind of trouble for them and confronted the manicurist. Typical jealous ex stuff who can't accept that life moves on, you know? This anonymous person had allegedly threatened the victim in this story here. But both of them, after being properly investigated, both the guy who supposedly dated Andreza and this ex were considered completely innocent and had no involvement whatsoever in the death of Andreza Cittini. Before the forensic team arrived, the family realized something serious had happened inside the house. It was Andreza's mother, Mrs. Erminda, who found traces of blood in her daughter's room under the wardrobe and scattered on the floor. That indicated that the crime hadn't happened outside the house. Andreza was attacked right there inside. What drew even more attention was the fact that someone had tried to clean up the crime scene. The blood had been partially removed from the floor, and a dirty face towel was found hidden on top of a wardrobe. This kind of behavior is rarely the work of a professional criminal, let's say, isn't it? It's typical of someone who's confused, in a panic maybe, someone who knows the house, someone who believes they can suddenly buy some time. The forensic report later confirmed Andreza died from asphyxiation, meaning she was strangled. There were clear signs of a physical struggle and a head injury, which caused the bleeding found at the scene. There was no evidence of sexual assault. Another important detail that came up during the investigation was that the back gate of the house had been forced open from the inside out. This indicated that whoever killed Andreza was probably inside the house and left through there to hide the body in the backyard near that little stream, the creek I mentioned to you earlier. By this point, the police already knew it wasn't a random kidnapping, and it was becoming increasingly clear that the perpetrator was part of the victim's inner circle.
Guys, we have a case here from São Paulo, extremely intriguing. Because this young woman, a beautiful, lively, hardworking girl,
She starts hanging out with someone, and her mother finds out she's seeing a man. So, the investigation moved forward with the analysis of the famous digital footprints, the digital traces, right? Andreza's cell phone, which was mirrored on her son's phone. The exchange of messages was interrupted around 7:15 in the morning. Security camera footage showed her half-brother, Edenilson Aparecido de Lima, leaving the house at 8:30, a time that contradicted his initial version. The man who is a bricklayer said that at that time he was already at the construction site working, so the security cameras were essential in this investigation. There weren't any cameras inside the house, but there's always one somewhere pointed at you, you know? As you remember, the victim lived with her 2 children, her mother, a sister, and a brother. To the police from the beginning, everyone claimed they weren't home at the time she was killed. But the police found out that Edenilson Lima, Andreza's half-brother, was the only one who stayed at the place. After the others left that morning, he hadn't left right after them, early to go to work, right? And he stayed there, and no one else was filmed entering the house, so it was just the two half-siblings who were there. The officer in charge of the case explained that the net was closing in, but that at first they gave Ed Nilsson a chance to speak. He's Andreza's half-brother on their father's side. After his divorce, he moved back to the house with his stepmother, Mrs. Erminda, and his half-sisters, Andreza and Viviana. He was there, in front of the police, having the opportunity to explain himself, but also with his right guaranteed not to say anything. This man, pretending to be a concerned older brother, shared posts on social media about the victim's disappearance and even attended his funeral. He stayed with the family, experiencing the commotion, making phone calls, saying he was worried. All of this was exactly so he wouldn't raise suspicion about himself. It's that old story, right? The more obvious it is, the more hidden it is. However, all the information he provided was inconsistent and contrary to the investigation. Finally, on August 21st, almost 2 weeks after the crime, Eddie Nilsson Aparecido Lima, 48 years old, was arrested without resistance. Soon after, he admitted his guilt and explained what happened. The details I'm about to share were provided by Detective Igor Barros da Silva in an interview with Radio Noticias de Tatuita. As mentioned, police quickly found Ed Nilsson was the only one at the property during the crime. The cameras didn't show anyone entering, and Andreza wasn't seen leaving either. His statement revealed that the fight was over financial reasons. But anyone who thinks it was about millions, inheritance, selling assets, life insurance, or things like that, as we've seen here many times, is mistaken. In this case, Ed Nilsson claimed that he and the victim argued because of unpaid bills. Pay attention to the details. The divorced brothers, who at the time were living under the same roof, their father's house, argued over the splitting of the water and electricity bills, in quotes. He said he had been angry with her for some time and that his intention was only to hit her. But it turned into a physical fight and he ended up strangling her, and she died of asphyxiation. After realizing he had killed his sister, Ed Nilsson dragged the body wrapped in that blanket that disappeared and threw it by the riverbank to make the family think she was missing. Guys, it catches our attention, doesn't it? The fact is that when researching this criminal case, several international news articles in Spanish started appearing, making us realize the reach of Andreza's posts and videos. Finally, on June 24, 2025, Eddie Nilsson Aparecido Lima was tried and sentenced to 18 years and 6 months in prison under a closed regime for killing his sister. This was out of a sentence that could have reached 30 years. The decision was made by a popular jury in Tatuí itself, the city where the femicide took place. The conviction was for qualified homicide with 3 aggravating factors: asphyxiation, difficulty for the victim to defend herself, and femicide. And the court ruled that the defendant cannot appeal while free. During the trial, the defendant confessed to the crime and claimed he lost his temper because of the alleged repeated humiliations by his sister. He also claimed Andreza started the aggression and in his statement expressed regret and wished he could change things. The victim's mother, his stepmother, who considered him as her own son, stated that he was lying and that Andreza only wanted the best for him and that's why she gave him advice. Other people also remembered that she was always playful and loved her siblings. She told her brother, the murderer, to take care of himself since he was handsome and should look after his teeth. In other words, a cowardly crime committed behind closed doors for no reason, pointless. Eddie Nilsson Aparecido de Lima's sentence frustrated Andreza's family, including her mother, sister Viviana, and everyone who followed the trial. The conviction didn't match the brutality of what happened in that house. While the murderer serves his sentence, 2 children will grow up without their mother, a mother who left their lives in a violent, unexpected, and definitive way. Viviana said that the family decided to leave the house where everything happened. There was no way to stay there. The memories of childhood, of living together, of happy moments, all of that was tainted by violence. Andreza Cittini was especially popular on TikTok and social media. Her videos on daily life, her work as a manicurist, and life in general attracted thousands, including many from abroad. After her death, the comments changed in tone with messages of farewell, outrage, and solidarity. And the salon where she worked summed up all the feelings left by her absence very well. A rainy, cold, and sad day. An absurd and untimely departure. Andreza was not killed out of old hatred by organized crime or by a stranger. She was murdered inside her own home by someone from her own family for a trivial reason. And that may be the most disturbing detail of this story. Danger often doesn't come from outside, it's already inside. People demanded justice for Andreza, but this aspect is more complex, and often justice falls short for society. Unfortunately, by the way, tell me here in the comments, for you who commits this kind of crime, a homicide against their own sister inside the house, should they qualify for a sentence progression in our legal system? I'm asking honestly because the other day I saw a guy who killed a man inside a gym. I think all of you saw it, right? Then I saw it. Maybe it was his custody hearing or a talk with the police chief, something leaked to the press. Then you look at the guy's face, he's completely calm. You know, the police chief explaining, the judge, I don't know, explaining things to him. Look, I'm going to ask you some questions. I want to know. You have the opportunity to explain what happened, show your side, but you also have the right to remain silent. The guy just sits there comfortably, staying quiet, not saying anything, but you can see it in his expression and body language. There was that thing like a sense of duty fulfilled, kind of morbid, you know? I wonder why he has that feeling that it's done, it's paid for. Is it because he knows he's gonna serve a few years and that's it? There's a danger in that, isn't there? At least in my view, it's absurd to give that impression, and I don't think it's just me who feels that way. If I'm wrong, please correct me, Mom. I would say that this perception that's being spread is alarming, revolting, and above all, it's just too sad for the families who are left grieving forever. I value your opinion and enjoy your company. Please like or comment, even with an emoji, it really helps. Thanks for your attention, a kiss from the redhead, and see you next episode.